It's my honor and privilege to welcome you to a weekly healthcare podcast, BW Healthcare World podcast, which we believe is very important and contextual to what's happening around us. We believe at BW Business World that healthcare entrepreneurship is a way to solve the problems we are facing currently, and hopefully if there are issues that need to be tackled in the future. So healthcare investments, changing the business model of healthcare, bringing more consciousness into investing in health. For many years, we've been talking about the healthcare spends in India are almost 2.6% of the GDP, while across the world they're 6% of the GDP. And we've been talking about it. We haven't done much. Yes, we have made some progress, but the last few weeks have shown that the healthcare infrastructure needs to be beefed up multiple times, whether it's the number of beds, whether it's the oxygen supply, whether it's the pharma, whether it's vaccine, whether it's trained manpower. And really somewhere we've seen over many years politicians take pride in saying, we brought down the price of this drug, we brought down the price of stents. It becomes a political issue. Healthcare should be about saving lives and livelihoods. So if you want to become a 5 trillion economy, first we have to save lives. So today we have an eminent panel, a group of healthcare entrepreneurs, professionals, practitioners, thought leaders who will join us on this conversation. Let me start by introducing each one of them. They're well known in the business, in the healthcare community. You really don't need an introduction, but just to contextualize and bring them in, let me welcome Dr. A. Velumani, who's the creator of Thyrocare. Thyrocare is a healthcare company, a diagnostics company that was founded by Dr. Velumani, and he took it public, and he's very vociferous in what he has to say and how he has to say. So welcome, Dr. Velumani. Today is the time to say as it is, and we look forward to hearing from you. What are the solutions? And again, we in the media also do lots of events, discussions, but we don't put enough pressure for follow through and execution. My endeavor would be to be able to make sure that this agenda continues and there is implementation. And people like Dr. Velumani will be an important stakeholder in making sure the execution happens. Let me also welcome Dr. Ruchi Das, who advises healthcare businesses, healthcare entrepreneurs, and is a voice in the healthcare domain. Dr. Ruchi Das joins us from UK. Welcome, Dr. Ruchi Das. Thank you for joining at a short notice and making sure you contribute to this important discussion. We also have Mr. Sudhir Mishra, who is a lawyer and does a lot of work in the environment space and the healthcare space. He's been a crusader for environment. The odd even petition in Delhi was many years back was filed by him. He's been talking about how healthcare infrastructure needs to be ramped up for at least the last 3 years that I've heard from him, if not the last 6 years. So clearly he feels very strongly about this and has done a lot of work in healthcare. So welcome, Mr. Mishra. Last but not the least, we have Mr. Vivek Srivastava, who's the founder of Healthcare at Home and represents the healthcare entrepreneur in this panel. Vivek, Healthcare at Home and its value has been realized in the last few months, and thank you for saving the lives that do save by your work. Welcome to this conversation, and I'm sure you'll contribute tremendously. Mr. Sunil Thakur, who is the Managing Director of Quadria Capital, will join us in some time. At the end of the day, to be able to grow the healthcare entrepreneurship pie, we need capital, and Sunil completes that link. So let me start by asking Dr. Velumani to make his opening comment. Dr. Velumani, what has gone wrong? How can it be corrected? What do we do moving forward? And Dr. Velumani, let me ask you right up front, if someone dies because of the lack of oxygen, because oxygen was not provided to him when it should have been there, what shall we call it? I mean, we'd like to hear, you're always upfront with what you have to say. So today we'd like you to say what you have to say, what you need to say, and what everyone needs to hear. Dr. Velumani from Thyrocare.
Right. Thank you, Anurag, and thank you, the panelists. Healthcare is a space which is giving a lot of energy, motivation, satisfaction, and returns. There was a good period for us to invest, but today there is a better period to invest. The entire world, pre-COVID, post-COVID, is how we see healthcare. And the kind of disruption this unknown, unseen virus has uprooted the hundreds of years of conventions in many ways. But having said that, we are 400 days old with the new enemy. We haven't understood, not individuals, even scientists, not just scientists, epidemiologists, not bureaucrats, not chief ministers, prime minister. It took everybody by a shock. When the second wave was to start, no one knew, and we all celebrated, exulted as if we had a wonderful management compared to the global big countries. And then today we are in such a big embarrassment. The first wave took time to peak. Second wave has taken much, much lesser time, and it is 3 times the first wave's peak. We don't know how long it will peak. What is the biggest worry is not the infection, not the death, the way in which poor, underprivileged are left to die. And for the last couple of weeks, the Twitter has become highly toxic. Of course, some exaggeration is there, but it is certainly not something which is one can hear or see. So it is frustrating. That's why I used in yesterday one of my tweets telling that if somebody is allowed to suffocate and die without oxygen, that's something which you just can't digest, and I call it as murder. Individuals don't murder. All living have not contributed for his life, and he has died. Coming back to the opportunity, I must tell you, in healthcare, there are only 3 kinds of entrepreneurs. One makes money, other makes a lot of money, and the third one makes hell of money. And in this toughest period, if somebody had made a lot of money, other than the politicians and bureaucrats, it is healthcare guys. And all of them made in black, and healthcare guy has made in black and white. So if you notice, all pharma companies, all diagnostic companies, all hospitals have certainly doubled their turnover, some of them even 5 times more. Profits are also there. There is a cry always, government is controlling, but there is enough money there, enough opportunity there. Let me honestly tell you, the biggest struggle before COVID struck was to make man to be aware of his body. Today, man is aware of his antibody. So to that extent, billions of dollars have gone into create an awareness which otherwise would have been very tough. So be there. It is time. Lot of opportunities, and it is going to be a wonderful field for investors to invest, entrepreneurs to get in, and also to scale up and become very powerful. The rest of the things I will respond when specific questions.
Dr. Velumani, I will bring other panelists, but I want to ask you 2 questions upfront. The reason I said the business model needs to undergo change is the Max Group. Again, we can talk about the specific business model. Max Group sold. Fortis sold. Of course, Fortis sold for a different reason, But the fact is, a lot of hospital chains are selling to larger players. So clearly, they're not being able to sustain. Clearly, the pricing of some of the services, while there need to be a pricing for economically weaker sections and affordable healthcare should be the order of the day. There is the Ayushman Bharat. But I fundamentally believe, as somebody who watches business and economy and healthcare, that somewhere the business model needs to undergo some seismic changes. So what are those? Second is, how do we really actualize the goal of investing almost double the money that we invest in healthcare right now? And if we estimate in last 15 months, the loss to the healthcare industry is almost $2 billion in India, almost $1.5 billion, or a little more than that to the organized healthcare, and almost $400 million to the neighborhood SMEs, the GPs in your neighborhood, because for almost 7 months they were not seeing any patients. So how do we double up on investments? And what are the policy interventions needed to be able to make healthcare even more attractive?
Sorry. See, healthcare wasn't done by entrepreneurs so far. Barring a few entrepreneurs in the industry, All the remaining have been running a professionally driven, less entrepreneurial driven. And also I must tell you, there is a punch which I keep telling. Profits never come from customers' pocket, it comes from floor efficiency. So if you look at even an airline, some airlines make terrible losses, some other airlines make unbelievable profits. So it's all a matter of how the floor efficiencies are working. Having said that, the scale gives advantage, and if there is a scale and efficiency, that gives the complete leadership. So people do buy inefficient system if they have an ability to make it efficient. And this will continue to happen not only in the healthcare industry, in every industry. I do understand, I also keep telling another punchline, there are two kinds of hospital, one in which the patient is lying on the ground because the bed is not there. In another, the watchman is sleeping on the bed because patient is not there. So is a doctor too. So there is, in fact, today all the chaos is not that country doesn't have enough oxygen. Where oxygen is there, demand is not there. Where demand is there, oxygen is not there. So is even diagnostic facilities. In Delhi and Mumbai, it is completely overfull. But all other laboratories in other parts of the country have capacity to be utilized. So there is what you call as uneven distribution of resources in the industry. So a lot is needed to find out how to run a crisp, scalable, profitable business. Then only the investors will come in there. Investors won't put in money until you have a system which is going to tomorrow give you returns. A lot in it. It's not that in a small session we can summarize it. But overall, efficiencies play a very big role. I run what you call as one of the lowest cost diagnostic laboratory. My balance sheet has got highest profit. People wonder, but then that is the way in which the system has been made. Single specialties will make more profit, multi-specialties will make less profits. So it's not a lot into it. Single specialty.
I remember a conversation from 3 years back when you said that when you acquired the equipment, the efficiencies in your acquiring the equipment from diagnostics, really added to your business model. I remember that conversation almost 3 years back. So thank you for contextualizing that. Let me bring in Dr. Ruchi Das.
No, before that, I'll just tell that. Yes. Just tell that punchline. Multi-speciality gives you security. Single speciality gives you prosperity. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for always having the punchline. You must get a book in with your punchlines. They're always relevant and they carry the message. Dr. Ruchi Das, again, you heard Dr. Velumani. You're in UK. In UK, we saw a surge of COVID, and there was initially a very big discussion around the role of national health services in UK and were they effective or not effective. Now you're seeing what's happening in India. What do you have to say, and what do you think is the solution to make sure that we fix it both in the short term and in the medium term?
So, first of all, Dr. Velumani, very, very nice insights. I think I absolutely agree with this point that the way the Indian healthcare structure and delivery is designed is very decentralized. So, majority regulatory body at the center, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, they hold decisions on most of the regulations and policy making, while they are not involved in healthcare delivery at the endpoint. So states are responsible for that, and that's why there is so much disparity between states, healthcare insurance, service delivery, coverage, access, and affordability across India. The second point that he very diligently made was about supply demand. India still do not have any source of understanding what is the demand and where the supply is lacking the most. There is absolutely no visibility into the system. And the reason for that are manifold. But one of the biggest reason is that the way the healthcare delivery is done, it is done with a very cramped infrastructure, very poor governance, and very few methods of ubiquitous financial access by the patients. So we live in a country where healthcare insurance is still minuscule. And the GDP, as you mentioned, the percentage of GDP contribution to healthcare is also very dismal. When you stay below 4% of GDP contribution in healthcare, you cannot think of wonders and miracles happening in the country. However, on the other hand, I would like to congratulate the government over a few things. They have crawled up to certain numbers, but they have been good numbers now. So we have at least reached the WHO doctor to patient ratio, which is fantastic in 2018. We are slowly getting into a model where we are talking about value as well as volume delivery. However, efficacy remains a question. Thousands of schemes have come and died. RSBY, Ayushman Yojana, and now the Prime Minister new scheme. But efficacy at the level of service delivery remains a question mark always. And in India, what I have seen in UK and many other developed countries as well, it is not an ecosystem play. It's a very profit-motivated market where even the demand is very supply-induced. So when you look at the microeconomic level of how in India service delivery is done, you will understand that fulfillment is either done basis who has more money or capacity to have out-of-pocket expenditure, or whoever can get there first. So it's a mad rush. You look at oxygen cylinders, you look at the queue at Green Park for the vaccinations, or you look at your nearby neighbor who has got COVID and he's immobile. You will see it is the devil's playground. However, I would say that things are not very different in countries like UK and US, who are also debattling some of these things. So no healthcare system is perfect, but if you look at some of the healthcare systems that have dealt with it nicely, including Iceland, Singapore, New Zealand, Taiwan, you would see some of the things that they have done right is creating a centralized system of governance and infrastructure so that things happen in such a way that everybody has got equal visibility into the system. And government has got the transparency to provide resources where they are most needed, rather than, spraying and praying. I think the spray and pray technique, that is what the Indian government should have a close new look at and realize. Also, I would like, as a doctor, I would also like to say that healthcare is always a doctor's responsibility in India. It has never been participative. It is time that it should become a doctor and a patient responsibility. You get outside of a hospital, recovered from COVID-19, and you start, meeting people. You start getting infected again, and the number of cases increase. That is your responsibility as a patient as well. So I don't think any governance, any infrastructure, or any sort of insurance can fix the mindset problem, which happens when people defy logic and want to do what they want.
Fantastic, Dr. Ruchidas. The only thing I say, what you said made sense, and you're right. It needs to be participative in the true sense of it. Iceland is a great example, Singapore, but some would say they are very few in number in terms of what they have to deal with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I think
they're more disciplined as nations.
I would not say disciplined, because I think discipline comes with governance. But I would say that these countries cannot be compared with India at any level. I mean, they are very, very small countries. They have, 8.9% of GDP contribution to healthcare. They have universal healthcare access. Most of them run on a single healthcare insurance system that is controlled by the government. And we do not have anything of that sort. Plus, we have a decentralized system. So you cannot obviously take a metric out of any Western country and put it on India and say, oh, this is what India is doing wrong. So I completely am on that with you.
Okay, Dr. Ruchidas, we'll come back to it and we'll focus on the numbers. Let me bring in Mr. Sudhir Mishra. Mr. Mishra, you've been a very vocal, proponent of more investments in the public healthcare infrastructure. Your fight for the quality of air in Delhi is well known. Give us a sense of what has gone wrong and what can be the solution. Mr. Mishra?
Muted.
Mr. Mishra, you'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Batra. And it's a great opportunity to talk about something which is actually puzzling all of us. So I will tell you that in last 72 hours, we have gone to the Delhi High Court late evenings, which was something like in my 20 years of career. Once or twice we had the opportunity of petitioning beyond court hours, and they were extraordinary situations. For number of hospitals, more than 40 petitions have been filed in last few days, and they all have been filed beyond court hours. Now, what are we talking about? We are talking about in these petitions, and I have shared few of those SMSs and WhatsApps by large hospitals to which I represent in Delhi. And these are the hospitals which never thought that one day the state will simply come and start trying to take over. So what is happening here? Somebody puts a lot of money, they create infrastructure. First, our mindset against private investment. And that is not only on healthcare, any enterprise. So that kind of mindset we start with. And today we are all, and I have used this analogy in earlier programs also, like a betal. Our government comes and sits on our back, like Vikram and Betal stories. And they expect the private sector to do each and everything. At the same time, every story, you go world over, people will criticize you for poor health facilities, but they will pride you that your public health, your polio program, a smallpox program is something neighboring countries have not been able to equal to. Now that was a pride for you. Today that pride has been broken. When Pakistan is talking about, we keep on comparing that what is happening in Pakistan on every TV channel nowadays. So I'm not going into details of healthcare because much more accomplished people are going to talk, but just let me flag off few of the things. The pride has been broken. When you're talking about this running of cylinders, and I'm not trying to hype it up, we all know what is going on. There is a lot of negativity which is being also spread. But can you tell me, when every district magistrate and district superintendent of police is available on WhatsApp, how can a oxygen carrying truck can be stopped? In a developed country like us, where we have the best IT infrastructure, best penetration of mobile phones. And for hours and hours, these hospitals are crying that we are left with 2 hours, we are left with 4 hours, we are left with 6 hours. Just imagine, I'm a lawyer. I'm also a son. My mother contacted COVID. Today, only she got positive. And my friend Vivek Srivastava and I were talking. Now, I'm still trying to keep my cool, but all around me, when I see each and everybody, whether it's judges, whether it's lawyers, whether it's a civil society, journalists, they all are getting affected. They are simply shocked. It's not that we are not responsible. Dr. Ruchi was absolutely right that we all became too relaxed. Dr. Velumani also said a right thing. And I also feel that this demand and supply catch-up game on how much oxygen has been exported earlier in the month of December, January, how it is, and all kind of things which are being talked about actually depicts one common factor, that health is never a priority. Your constitution says that health is a state subject. But when you started with the pandemic, you started with a very centralized system. Slowly and slowly, you decentralized without actually passing the baton. So nobody knows who is in charge. You can't be expecting chief ministers coming on television and saying, please tell me a number, whom do I talk to for my oxygen? What a sentiment of a common citizen who is staying in Delhi and Mumbai will be left with. What confidence he'll be left with. It's all about perception and confidence, Anuragji. You know, one pyaj costed 15 years to BJP in Delhi. One pyaj.
Okay. Mr. Mishra, we understand the gravity of the situation. That's why we are doing it. We're keeping a straight face and doing what we need to. But some of us, I couldn't sleep well last night because I kept thinking we in the media don't do a good job of putting enough pressure on the authorities to be able to hold them accountable. And, I felt guilty last night, of not doing my job better as a citizen, as a media professional. My 17-year-old daughter has been telling me that please donate the plasma so that, you can save a life, because I've had COVID, so I have the plasma. But when I talk to my doctor friends, they say while it can be done at home, but it's too risky to step out. So I was caught between that choice. So I'll come back to you for solution. We know what the problems are. Let me bring in Mr. Sunil Thakur of Quadria Capital has also joined. Sunil, the last count, had a $1 billion fund to invest in healthcare and has invested aggressively over the last 5 years in healthcare. We'll get you into the conversation soon very shortly. But let me bring in Mr. Vivek Srivastava. Vivek, again, you heard Dr. Velumani, Dr. Ruchi Das, and Mr. Sudhir Mishra. I'd love to get your opening comments. Vivek?
I think pandemic has hit us in a way no one have imagined it, and hence any kind of system which would have been built in crumble at this peak demand, right? Whether it is the most advanced of systems could just crumble because the demand is just so high. I'll give you an example. We are missing 1,000 leads a day, right? In spite of doubling my capacity, we are unable to take cases, beyond a certain level. My phone has not stopped ringing for the last 4-5 days. Frantic calls coming in and so on and so forth. But I think once in a lifetime which happens. But definitely one thing which we should be doing is increasing the investment into the healthcare space, and that happens as Dr. Velumani said. If you make profit, investors will come in, and hence and I think we have learned ourselves lessons. Dr. Velumani was saying that you have to get the profit out of the efficiency. So we ourselves were a loss-making company, and we became profitable last, as I have told you earlier, that. So I think as businesses become more and more profitable, investment will get attracted. I think what we need from the government, we just help support the entrepreneurship in this sector by additional recognition of new ideas. I'll give you an example, right? There's our industry, which is the outside of the hospital industry, which is never recognized. It is just that because of the sheer scale of madness which is there, that people are recognizing it, and we are coming in, and everyone is asking for it. But are we actually recognized under the healthcare system? The answer is no. When the pandemic moves out, people will just forget, and then it will be for healthcare, it is hospital. Right? While India is a chronic disease capital of the world, hospitals cannot handle chronic diseases. They're not designed, incentivized to do that. You have to have outside of the hospital system, chronic disease players like us managing patients outside of the hospital. We already do. In COVID, we've handled 4 lakh odd patients, working with multiple governments, including the Delhi government, Punjab government, etc., to execute this without having beds, right? And hence these kind of new ideas, as Dr. Velumani said, that new entrepreneurship should be coming into the sector. That should be encouraged by government policies, as well as if the profit comes in, I'm sure the investors will come in.
Okay, let us bring the investor into the conversation. Sunil, you look at many businesses, you look at the ideas of many entrepreneurs. I know of multiple businesses that you've invested in, partnered with. Give us a sense of what is happening in the Indian healthcare ecosystem, and should we be hopeful of the future? And if yes, why? And if not, what are the steps we need to take?
Yeah, so thanks Anurag, and I'm sorry for joining in a bit late. But just to share my thoughts on this, I don't think as an entrepreneur one needs to be disheartened from the opportunity that one could take out from the crisis. The crisis, obviously, it's very bad and it's very saddening. But as an investor backing entrepreneurs, there is, I don't think thematically there is anything wrong. In fact, what will come out of this crisis is going to be all positive. And it depends on the varying degree. Now, if I just talk about, the big learnings that we see from the crisis, especially the second time around, the second wave, and as an investor, what I expect is clarity in communication. I think that particular thing is completely broken down. There is, everybody's been left to their own to assume, what needs to be done, both from a protocol, from a clinical intervention, about each and everything that one needs to do to manage their life in this kind of crisis. So there is zero communication. The communication chain has been broken. Then I come to the regulatory side. The policy, there is no coherence in policy. We thought that the way it was evolving last year, one thought that once we come out of it, the government will take a note of what has happened, and there will be a clear policy, encouraging policy to bring in investment, to encourage entrepreneur. But I think again we failed on that side. The third aspect is the entire supply chain. That's completely smashed. As in, if a year back we were discussing about the broken supply chain, this time it has gone to the next level. Be it medicine, be it equipment, be it beds, all that has completely gone for a toss. Then if I look at the other challenge, government hasn't come out with any clear direction in the budgetary allocation. With this kind of a crisis, it can at least motivate the sector by increasing the budgetary allocation. That is required, and maybe use that means to get to that 2.5% that one is hoping to get to. Role clarity. Again, there is again no clarity in what position the government wants to take. Does it want to be a provider? There is no clue. Public doesn't know where to go to. Are there 500 beds being set up somewhere? 1,000 beds being set up somewhere? There is no role clarity. Is the government coming out and financing people? Ayushman Bharat was the last thing that one heard. So what is the role that the government is playing? Are they going to purchase medicines and have these ration shops to sell medicines, cylinders, concentrators to? So the role clarity is again not there, and that is linked to again the communication part, and the whole care pathway has completely broken. Quite a few, and Vivek would have the right number of patients can be treated at home, and that's a program that Vivek is successfully running. But as he mentioned, because of resource constraint on his side, there are 1,000 bounced calls that he's getting. So this again, the communication part that you can be taken care of at home. This is what needs to be done. So all that has come together at one go and created a big confusion. That said, if we still take this crisis as an opportunity, both for government to step back, think what it should be doing to avert any such situation, that would still be a good step. From an investor, from an entrepreneur perspective, I believe that this could be a big lesson. This crisis could be a big lesson for us to fix things going forward.
At a huge cost. The loss of life.
It comes at a huge cost, yeah. But we have no other option, as in the world is not going to come to an end, and therefore we have to look in the future if we can't solve for today, and see that we are better positioned when we get to the future. And a couple of things that we need as a sector that we need to take care of is that the role of digitization is going to become very, very important. How do you use digitization to empower consumer? Because you have to spread the responsibility of clinical intervention. Today or 5 years back, 100% of whatever one thought would be required from a clinical intervention was solely in the hands of doctors. Today, because of the entire digital intervention, there are quite a few things that people can read, can utilize that knowledge to take care of themselves. So how do you start to propagate? How do you start to decongest hospitals by doing online OPDs? That consumer behavior has started to happen. Then how do you use digitization to make the entire supply chain efficient at the hospital end, which will also lead to lowering of cost and increasing of quality? So digitization is going to be an important part. Then how do you fix the entire supply chain? When I say fixing this entire supply chain, it means consistency of services. How do you start to work with people who can give you a better BCP, business continuity? Today, we face the biggest challenge in supply chain. Hospitals were dealing with fringe players who just ran away on the second day of COVID because that business model cracked completely. So how do you work with trusted partners, which also means, the evolution of this whole outsourcing model. Hospitals are meant to give care. They are not meant to do everything that you see in a hospital. The second aspect on supply chain is how do you start to consolidate and bring the entire cost down? So, go with a VPO kind of a model. So that's the second aspect. The third aspect is the entire workflow management in a hospital. Crisis has had forced us to work with lower manpower. And suddenly hospitals realized that, at a time, about 2 years back, when they had a bed ratio of around 6 to a bed, they could operate with the same efficiency, get the same revenues with, 4 to a bed or a 3 to a bed. Again, this plays into the whole workflow, lowering of cost. And the last bit is the entire integrated care pathway. If one can be taken care of at home, no point coming to the hospital. There is a model called home healthcare. Reach out to home healthcare. You could reach out to teleconsultation and do the consultation. You don't need to come to the hospital. Hospitals are meant only for IPD, serious conditions. So these are things that could be utilized and create an opportunity for entrepreneurs and investors. So that's
Sunil, thank you for outlining the opportunities in the healthcare value chain. The only thing I thought that is missing, and it's not featured in our conversation, I did bring in is, I was reading this Adam Grant article called from his new book called Languishing. The mental issues that are coming up through COVID. And again, when it comes to trained psychologists, trained counselors, while we are the most depressed nation in the world by sheer numbers, we don't have enough counselors. We don't have enough people giving the right mental health advice. So do you think the mental health space will also see more investments?
Absolutely. And mental health is one area that can to a large extent be taken care by digital therapy. In the Western markets, there are very successful models, and we see that happening in India also. So, your chronic care, your mental health can be easily taken care of by digital healthcare models. You don't need clinical intervention, especially at the early stage. Only when it starts to get complicated is when you need a clinical intervention. So it's a huge opportunity. There is a significant latent demand. People are not coming out, but thanks to some of the big Bollywood stars, who have come out in the open, there is a recognition that it's a disease, and one doesn't need to see it as a social stigma. And so that has started to happen. Now, how do we use digital therapy to attend to those situations? Because the counselors and the clinical intervention is very, very limited when you get to a tier 2, tier 3 cities for these kind of ailments. So again, how do you use the digital model to get to those kind of people? So it's again an area that can be clearly attended to through digital model, and for entrepreneurs and investors, again, it's an area of opportunity to invest.
Thank you so much, Sunil. We'll come back to you, but let me bring in Dr. Velumani again. Dr. Velumani, now you heard everyone on the panel. The one development that happened yesterday and today was Zydus Cadilla's Virafin, which is a pegylated interferon alpha 2B, has been approved for emergency use. Emergency note for Virafin has come in, and they say a single dose of that can help patients who have mild or severe COVID, and it kind of avoids all the complications. So it's a welcome development. It's an Indian company, and drug seems to be and if the drug is administered early or during COVID, Virafin can help patients recover. So really, is that a welcome development? And do you think it will have an impact on the treatment of COVID, Dr. Velumani?
Something is better than nothing is one thing. Having said that, last year chloroquine was said will solve the problem. It didn't. Remdesivir is going on for the last few quarters. I don't think it is solving the problem. I don't think it is truly helping to recover. So as on today, there is no medicine available for treating COVID. by knowing it is positive from a laboratory test report, I don't think it influences the clinical management at all. Having said that, in the long run, we will not have a solution just because we have vaccine. We need to have a drug. Vaccine prevents people getting into trouble, but it doesn't block it completely. Once you got into trouble, how to reverse the trouble? No research has been done, at least in India, I don't know globally. What kills? Why some die? Why others don't? What is wrong with those who are dying? There is not much of correlation is seen. And it is affecting the 1 or 2% depending upon the geography of the infected, we are losing the life. So it is a very desperate need for us to invent a drug or combinations of drugs that would help us to prevent death, without which we will continue to remain panicked. Today the panic is, am I in there in that 1%? He is not imagining I am there in that 99%. So that is completely killing him even before the virus kills him. All desperate queue standing in front of hospitals, all of them are not victims. That among them only 1 or 2% are going to be victims. So if we have some drug, I hope it comes sooner. In my personal opinion, I'm making a wild guess. It's not that anybody can guess, all are wrong. So assuming that I also will be wrong, but I'm still making a guess. In the next 10 years, 10% of the deaths will be because of COVID. And if you have got a drug, it can come down to 2%. And if there is no drug, it will remain 10%. This is my view, and drug is very important. If what they have announced, if it is a solution, we got it. If it is not a full solution, we have to wait for something more. And there are combination is helping, we are going to relax. Until that time, we just contract.